She thought she was being arrested for murder. She wasn't. She was being detained so a king could decide whether she deserved to live. Aveline Corso realized something was wrong the moment the unmarked car slowed beside her. No sirens, no uniforms, just tinted glass and the subtle confidence of people who didn't need permission. In the real world, that kind of authority didn't belong to the police. Two men stepped out, not rushed, not aggressive, calm, professional, dressed like they had places to be afterward. "Aveline Corso," one of them said, already knowing the answer, "you're coming with us." She didn't resist. People who grow up in certain cities learn early panic escalates situations, questions provoke reactions, silence buys time. They didn't handcuff her. That frightened her more than if they had. As the car pulled away, Aveline's mind replayed the last few weeks with brutal clarity. The old woman, the apartment, the sharp eyes behind frail skin, Serafina Virelli. The way neighbors avoided the building, the warnings she ignored because doing the right thing had never come with guarantees. Serafina had collapsed quietly. No struggle, no drama. Aveline had done everything by the book, checked vitals, called emergency services, stayed until the end. The death certificate confirmed it. Natural causes. So why this? The car drove beyond familiar streets, crossing invisible boundaries most people never noticed until they were taken past them. Security gates opened without pause. Cameras tracked their movement. Whoever controlled this place controlled more than crime, they controlled infrastructure. They brought her into a room stripped of comfort. A table, 2 chairs, no windows, no threats, just waiting. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, the door opened. Raffaele Virelli entered without ceremony. He didn't look like the movies. No exaggerated swagger, no theatrical menace. He looked like a man used to decisions sticking the moment they were made. Calm eyes, controlled posture, power that didn't need volume. He sat across from her, folding his hands as if this were a business meeting. "My mother trusted you," he said. Not a question. Aveline met his gaze. "I didn't know who she was." "I know," Raffaele replied. That single sentence shattered every defense she had prepared. He slid a thin file across the table. Medical reports, surveillance stills, timestamps, proof. Everything she had said verified. "You treated her like a person," he continued. "Not a name, not a consequence." Aveline swallowed. She was lonely. That was when something changed, not visibly, but decisively. Real-world power doesn't explode. It recalibrates. "You understand," Raffaele said slowly, "that people will believe you mattered to her because I'm allowing you to sit here breathing." "So, what happens now?" Aveline asked. Outside, engines hummed. Somewhere else in the city, men were already asking the same question for different reasons. Raffaele leaned back. "Now," he said, "I decide whether your existence is a liability or a responsibility." Aveline understood then. This wasn't about guilt or innocence. This was about proximity to power, about being seen by the wrong person at the wrong time for the right reasons. And once power notices you, it never unlearns your name. Aveline was not released that night. She was moved. There was a difference. And she understood it immediately. The room she was taken to was not a cell. It had clean walls, a bed that had never known desperation, and a bathroom stocked with necessities someone had anticipated she would need. That was the first lesson. When power takes responsibility for you, it does not look like cruelty. It looks like control disguised as care. She sat on the edge of the bed long after the door closed, listening to the silence. No screams, no threats, no drama, just distance from her job, her routine, her small apartment that suddenly felt like it belonged to another life. In the real world, danger was rarely loud. Aveline replayed Raffaele Virelli's words again and again. Liability, or responsibility. Those were not moral categories, they were operational ones. Her phone had been taken, but her mind was still hers. She thought of Serafina not as a name now, but as a woman who insisted on drinking her tea too hot, who criticized Aveline's shoes, who once said, "People think weakness comes with age. They're wrong. It comes with being careless." Had Serafina known this would happen, The question unsettled her more than fear. Hours later, a knock came, not sharp, not aggressive. A man entered carrying a tray. Food, water, medication for the headache Aveline hadn't admitted to having. He spoke little, but when he did, it was respectful. That respect frightened her more than hostility. "Am I free to leave?" Aveline asked. The man paused, choosing honesty over comfort. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because the city is adjusting." That answer made sense in a way only real-world answers do. Outside those walls, people were recalculating risk. Rivals were watching for weakness. Associates were waiting for direction. When someone like Raffaele Virelli hesitated even briefly, others noticed. Aveline wasn't a prisoner. She was a variable. The next morning, Raffaele returned not to interrogate, but to observe. He stood near the window, looking out over a city that obeyed him without knowing his face. "You don't belong to my world," he said. "I never asked to," Aveline replied. "That's exactly the problem." He turned to her then, studying her the way men like him studied supply routes and balance sheets. Not sentimentally, precisely. "My mother didn't trust easily," he said. "She trusted you." Aveline chose her words carefully. "She didn't trust me because of who I was. She trusted me because I stayed." Silence followed. Not disagreement, consideration. "You could have walked away," Raffaele said. "Yes, but you didn't." "No." That was the moment Aveline realized something dangerous. She wasn't explaining herself anymore. She was being understood. Raffaele exhaled slowly. "People will come for you," he said. "Not because they want you, because they want to test me." "And what happens to people who test you?" she asked. "They usually regret it." Aveline met his gaze, steady. "Then let me go. Don't make me part of it." Raffaele shook his head. "It's too late for that." Outside, the city continued breathing traffic lights, closed deals, quiet threats moving through phone calls and glances. Systems adjusting to a new truth. A woman with no ambition for power had been noticed by it. And in the real world, once power notices you, neutrality is no longer an option. By the third day, Aveline understood the rhythm of the place. Morning arrived without clocks, meals appeared without conversation, doors opened only after cameras adjusted. This was not imprisonment, it was containment, the kind used for things that mattered too much to be mishandled. She was allowed to walk the corridor outside her room. No guards followed her, but she felt them anyway in the pause of elevators, in the subtle click of locks she never touched. Real power didn't hover. It accounted. Outside, the city was already responding. Raffaele Virelli hadn't announced anything. He didn't need to. His silence was the message. When a man like him withdrew attention from routine operations, others noticed the vacuum immediately. Aveline saw the evidence indirectly. A television in the common area played muted news footage. A warehouse fire labeled accidental. A transport union leader stepping down for health reasons. A city council vote postponed without explanation. None of it looked connected. All of it was. The city wasn't panicking. It was listening. Later that afternoon, Raffaele met with his lieutenants in a room Aveline was not meant to see but could hear if she paid attention. Voices were calm, no raised tones. Disagreement expressed through pauses, not volume. "She's not leverage," one voice said. "She's a question, and questions create instability," another replied. Raffaele ended it simply. "Instability comes from uncertainty. I'm handling it." That was enough. When he visited Aveline again, it wasn't planned. He arrived between movements, like someone checking a variable mid-calculation. "You're becoming visible," he said. "I haven't left this building," she replied. Visibility, she was learning, had nothing to do with location. "They're watching how long you stay alive," Raffaele continued. "Some believe your survival means I'm distracted." "And are you?" Aveline asked. He considered her. "No, but perception creates opportunity." That night, the first real threat appeared, not dramatic, not violent. A courier was intercepted 2 streets away carrying a message meant for her. No bomb, no weapon, just a note. "Accidents happen when people don't know where they stand." Raffaele read it once and handed it to his security chief. "Remove the sender," he said, not angrily, practically. Aveline watched the exchange from across the room. Someone will die because of me, she said quietly. Someone was going to die anyway, Raffaele replied. You just revealed where the pressure points are. That answer didn't comfort her, but it was honest. The next morning, Raffaele made a decision that shifted everything. He allowed Aveline outside, not into the city, into a controlled public space. A restaurant closed for renovation, a walk along a monitored street. Just enough exposure to signal something dangerous. She was under protection. Protection was never neutral. It was a declaration. People noticed. Cars slowed. Phones came out. Conversations stopped when she passed. No one approached her, but everyone recalculated what she meant. That night, alone again, Aveline finally understood the full weight of her situation. She had not been taken because she was weak. She had been kept because she mattered to the wrong man at the wrong time for the right reasons. Outside, the city continued its quiet negotiations. Inside, power and morality were moving closer, drawn together by consequence. And somewhere beyond the walls, someone was already planning how to turn her existence into a test Raffaele Virelli could not ignore. The first mistake wasn't the threat. It was the assumption that protection was invisible. Raffaele Virelli understood immediately when the pattern shifted, not through alarms or panic, but through absence. A familiar car failed to report in. A trusted contact delayed a response by 4 minutes too long. In his world, silence had weight. Aveline felt it before she saw it. The air changed during her second supervised outing. The street was ordinary coffee shops opening, delivery trucks double parked, people pretending not to notice what they always noticed. But the rhythm was wrong. Conversations stopped too quickly. A man crossed the street twice without purpose. She slowed. So this is what it feels like, she said quietly. Raffaele glanced at her. What? To be the reason a city holds its breath. They reached the car without incident, but the message had already landed. That night, the retaliation came not violent, but surgical. One of Raffaele's shell businesses was audited. A supply route stalled at the port. Nothing that would make headlines. Everything that signaled intent. Someone was testing how much disruption her protection justified. Raffaele met with his inner circle before dawn. The question wasn't whether to respond, it was how publicly. If we escalate, we confirm she matters, one lieutenant warned. If we don't, another countered, they'll keep pushing. Raffaele ended the debate. They already know she matters. What they don't know is how expensive that knowledge is. By midday, the first message was delivered. A mid-level operator tied to a rival faction vanished from the city's systems, bank access frozen, properties seized, travel blocked. He wasn't killed. He was erased. That was deliberate. Aveline learned about it over dinner she barely touched. Someone lost everything today because of me, she said. No, Raffaele corrected calmly. He lost it because he mistook restraint for weakness. You're turning me into a symbol. You became one the moment you stayed with my mother. The truth of that landed hard. Later that night, Aveline insisted on walking the corridor alone. She needed movement, space to think. Halfway down, she noticed a door slightly ajar where it had always been closed. The sound came next, a soft click, almost polite. She turned just as a hand reached for her. The security response was immediate, silent, overwhelming. The man was restrained before he could speak. No weapon, no mask, just desperation and poor judgment. A test. Raffaele arrived seconds later, his expression unreadable. Who sent you? He asked the man. The answer never came. The consequences did. Aveline watched from behind glass as order was restored without spectacle. No shouting, no chaos, just removal. When it was over, she faced Raffaele. Your protection is putting people in danger, she said. Yes, he replied, including you. Then let me leave. He shook his head. You don't understand yet. Protection doesn't create danger. It reveals it. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, not as her captor, but as a man managing collapse with discipline. And when does it end? She asked. When the city relearns its boundaries. Outside, the streets resumed their normal pulse. Inside, the rules had changed. Protection was no longer passive. It was a challenge. And somewhere beyond the walls, someone was preparing to answer it with blood. The first blood was not dramatic. It never is. It happened in the early morning, when the city was most honest, half awake, unguarded by noise. A delivery van missed a scheduled checkpoint near the river. No alarms sounded, no emergency calls followed. Just absence. Raffaele Virelli received the report while standing at the window of his office, watching the city prepare itself for another ordinary day. He didn't react immediately. Men like him learned long ago that reaction was expensive. "Who was in the van?" he asked. "Two of ours," his security chief replied. "One driver, one escort. And the cargo? Medical supplies. Legitimate. That was the point. They weren't attacking his money anymore. They were attacking his signal." Raffaele closed his eyes briefly. Not in grief. In calculation. Aveline learned what happened from the silence that followed. No breakfast tray arrived that morning. No polite knock. The building felt hollowed out, like breath held too long. When Raffaele finally came to her, his jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. That detail told her more than his expression ever could. "Someone died," she said. "Yes, because of me." "No," he replied, "because someone wanted to see how far I'd go. And how far will you?" Raffaele studied her, weighing honesty against necessity. Far enough that no one asks that question again. She felt the shift, then the subtle but permanent tilt of the world. This wasn't pressure anymore. This was war logic tightening its grip. By afternoon, the response began. A warehouse linked to a rival faction was seized under the cover of a regulatory investigation. Trucks were impounded, accounts frozen. By nightfall, one man responsible for authorizing the ambush was located in a motel outside the city. Raffaele went himself. That was the second line crossed. When he returned hours later, there was blood on his cuff. Not much, just enough to mark the moment. Aveline noticed immediately. "You said you wouldn't escalate," she said. "I said I wouldn't overreact." "What's the difference?" "Control." She stood, anger cutting through fear. "Two men are dead." "Yes. And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he said calmly, "the city will be quieter." Aveline shook her head. "This ends with more blood. It ends when order is restored. And what if I can't accept that?" Raffaele stepped closer, not threatening, not gentle, honest. "Then you shouldn't be here." The words hurt more than she expected. That night, the second attempt came. This one was sloppy, desperate. A young man with a gun and no plan fired at a moving vehicle meant to carry Aveline. He missed. Security responded instantly. The shooter didn't survive. That death landed differently, because it was unnecessary, because it was panicked, because it proved something Raffaele hadn't wanted to admit yet. Fear was spreading faster than discipline. Afterward, Aveline sat alone in the dark, hands shaking for the first time since all of this began. When Raffaele joined her, neither spoke for a long moment. "You can't protect me from this world," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "But I can protect this world from what it becomes when I don't act." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the cost written into his stillness. "And who protects you?" she asked. Raffaele didn't answer. Outside, sirens wailed briefly, then faded. The city adjusted again, recalibrating fear. The line had been crossed. Blood had been spilled, and there was no returning to restraint without consequence. From this point forward, every choice would cost more than the last. Aveline did not ask questions immediately. That was the first sign something had changed. In the days following the bloodshed, she watched instead patterns, movements, silences. She noticed how decisions flowed through layers of people who never raised their voices. How fear didn't rush anymore, it settled. How order returned not because people felt safe, but because they understood the cost of disorder. This was not chaos. It was a system. Raffaele allowed her access gradually, not as permission, but as inevitability. When someone stays close to power long enough, the truth stops hiding. It assumes proximity equals understanding. She saw documents left where they didn't need to be hidden. Heard conversations that paused when she entered, then continued anyway. She recognized routes, timings, redundancies, the architecture of control. "You're letting me see this," she said one evening. "Yes." "Why?" "Because pretending you don't already understand would be dishonest." That answer unsettled her. The truth was not that Raffaele ruled through brutality. Brutality was inefficient. He ruled through predictability, contracts honored, debts enforced, violence used sparingly, decisively, and only when alternatives failed. In the real world, that distinction mattered. What happens to people who want out? Aveline asked. Raffaele didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was level. They leave poorer, or quieter. It depends on how much damage they've done. That's not freedom. No, he agreed. It's consequence. The word lingered between them. Later that night, Aveline accessed records she hadn't known she could see. Financial flows, shell companies, charitable fronts. She recognized hospital funding, infrastructure grants, community programs built on money that began in violence and ended in stability. The contradiction was suffocating. She confronted him the next morning. "You fund the clinics I work in," she said. "With blood money." "With money," he corrected. "Blood is the tax the world charges for power. That doesn't make it clean." "No," he said. "It makes it real." Her voice sharpened. "You don't get to decide who pays that tax." "I already have," Raffaele replied. "So has every government you've ever lived under. The difference is honesty." That was the moment the truth became dangerous, not because it was shocking, but because it made sense. Aveline stepped back. "If I stay here, I become complicit. If you leave," he said, "you become vulnerable." The choice was no longer theoretical. That afternoon, a message arrived from outside an offer: protection, asylum, a promise that if Aveline testified, if she spoke publicly, forces larger than Raffaele would intervene. She showed him the message. "This is my exit," she said. Raffaele read it once. Then again. He handed the phone back. "They'll use you," he said. "And when they're done, they won't protect you." "And you will?" "I already am." "That's not protection," she said quietly. "That's possession." The accusation landed. Raffaele stood still for a long moment. When he spoke, it wasn't defensive. It was measured. "My mother trusted you because you stayed," he said. "I'm asking you to decide whether you can do the same knowing everything." Aveline felt the weight of it press down on her chest. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about morality. It was about whether truth demanded distance or responsibility. Outside, the city moved forward, unaware that a far more dangerous confrontation was unfolding quietly, behind closed doors. Because when truth enters a system built on power, it doesn't destroy it immediately. It forces a choice. And whichever way that choice falls, something is going to break. The choice did not arrive dramatically. There was no explosion, no public declaration, no moment that felt cinematic enough to prepare her. It arrived as a deadline. Aveline found the phone waiting for her on the table when she returned to her room. Different from the last one. No password. One message already open. "You have 48 hours. No signature was needed." She took it straight to Raffaele. "They're done waiting," she said. He read it once, then set the phone down carefully, as if the surface beneath it mattered. "They've decided you're useful now." "And you?" she asked. "What have you decided?" "That the window is closing." For the first time since she'd known him, Raffaele looked constrained not by fear, but by timing. In his world, delays created weakness. Weakness invited replacement. He called his security chief and issued instructions that carried weight. Routes were changed, meetings cancelled, assets repositioned, the system tightened around a single point: her. That night, the second real move was made. A convoy meant to carry Raffaele through the east side of the city was hit not with gunfire, but with coordination. Traffic lights failed, streets clogged. A false emergency diverted patrol units. It was clean, smart, expensive. Someone wanted to isolate him. Instead, they found her. Aveline was in transit between secure locations when the vehicle in front of hers braked suddenly. The driver reacted instantly, swerving just enough to avoid impact. A motorcycle cut in from the side, its rider lifting something metallic into view. The sound never came. The rider was taken down before he could fire. Efficient, silent, final. When the convoy reached safety, Aveline was shaking not from fear, but from clarity. "This doesn't stop," she said. "It escalates." "Yes," Raffaele replied. Until one side accepts the cost. And which side is that supposed to be? He looked at her then, and she understood. The city was no longer the battlefield. She was. Later, alone together, the conversation finally turned honest in the way only exhaustion allows. You can still leave, Raffaele said. But if you do, you leave tonight, quietly. No protection, no announcements. And if I stay? Then I dismantle what's threatening you, even if it weakens me. She stared at him. You'd risk your empire for this? For a line, he corrected. Once crossed, it can't be uncrossed. Aveline thought of her father, of Serafina, of systems that crushed people who tried to remain untouched. There is no clean choice, she said. No, Raffaele agreed. Only chosen ones. The 48 hours ticked down faster than she expected. At dawn, she made her decision. She did not leave. She walked into Raffaele's office and closed the door behind her. If I stay, she said, I don't become your shield, I don't become your symbol, and I don't become your silence. He waited. You draw the line, she continued. Publicly. You end this without innocent blood or I walk. Consequences be damned. Raffaele considered her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Then we do this the hard way. Outside, the city shifted again. Orders moved. Alliances fractured. A structure that had stood untouched for years began to bend under deliberate pressure. The choice had been forced. Not by threats, not by violence, but by two people refusing to surrender responsibility to fear. And in a world built on power, that kind of defiance never goes unanswered. Power didn't collapse. It contracted. Raffaele Varelli dismantled his own advantage piece by piece, the way a surgeon cuts away healthy tissue to stop a deeper infection. He didn't announce it. Announcements invited resistance. He moved quietly, contracts terminated, routes abandoned, intermediaries cut loose without warning. To outsiders, it looked like weakness. To those who understood systems, it looked like intent. Aveline watched the effects ripple outward. Meetings grew shorter. Security shifted from expansion to containment. Long-standing partners called and were redirected politely, firmly, permanently. Money slowed. Influence narrowed. Fear changed shape. It was no longer sharp and immediate. It became uncertain. That was the cost. You're bleeding leverage, Aveline said one evening as she studied a map stripped of half its markings. Yes, Raffaele replied, and buying time. For what? For them to miscalculate. He had drawn the line publicly, not with speeches, but with absence. Operations tied to collateral damage were shut down. Enforcers known for excess were removed. The message was clear to anyone paying attention. The rules had changed. Some respected it. Others smelled opportunity. The first defection came from within. A trusted lieutenant failed to show for a scheduled briefing. By nightfall, word reached them. He'd aligned himself with a rival bloc, offering access in exchange for protection. That was inevitable, Raffaele said calmly. You don't sound surprised, Aveline noted. I would have done the same, he replied. Years ago. The honesty unsettled her. Retaliation followed, not violent, but strategic. Properties were seized through legal pressure, licenses revoked. An investigation surfaced that had been buried for a decade. It wasn't coincidence. It was coordinated. The city was testing whether restraint meant surrender. Aveline felt the pressure personally now. Her movements tightened again. Familiar faces disappeared. New ones took their place, less relaxed, more alert. This is costing you, she said. Raffaele didn't deny it. Everything costs something. I'm just choosing what I'm willing to pay. That night, the call came. An intermediary, neutral ground, a proposal. End the conflict quickly. One death, not hers, but close enough to make the point. A witness from the earlier ambush. Innocent, replaceable, they argued. The city would settle. Markets would stabilize. Fear would return to its proper lanes. Aveline heard the details without interruption. When the call ended, the room felt smaller. This is the easier path, Raffaele said quietly. And the one you would have chosen before, she replied. Yes. Silence stretched between them, not hostile, but heavy. If you do this, Aveline said, everything you've given up means nothing. And if I don't, he replied, I lose more than I already have. She met his gaze. Then lose it. That was the moment power truly paid its price. Raffaele declined the offer. The fallout was immediate. Markets reacted. Alliances hardened. The rival bloc moved aggressively, confident now that his restraint had limits they could exploit. Control slipped not dramatically, but measurably. Aveline saw it in the numbers, in the longer pauses between confirmations, in the way Raffaele's world no longer bent automatically around his decisions. You could still change your mind, she said later. No one would know it was you. Raffaele shook his head. I would. Outside, the city did not burn. It recalibrated. Power had not vanished, but it was no longer absolute. For the first time, Aveline saw Raffaele not as a ruler, but as a man choosing the weight he would carry forward, and she understood something dangerous and irreversible. In a world built on fear, restraint is the most expensive currency there is. And someone was about to force him to prove whether he could afford it. The city did not forgive, it adapted. That was the truth Raffaele Virelli had always understood, long before Aveline Corso ever entered his world. Systems did not care about morality. They responded to pressure, scarcity, and opportunity. When absolute power withdrew, something else rushed in to occupy the space it left behind. But not everything changed. The rival bloc that had pushed hardest did not take control. They misjudged the depth of the foundations Raffaele had laid. His restraint had cost him dominance, but it had not erased loyalty. Men who stayed did so not out of fear, but recognition. They understood the difference. The city settled into a new equilibrium, less centralized, more cautious. Violence did not disappear. It narrowed. Where chaos had once threatened to spill outward, it was contained again, though never fully erased. Aveline saw it in the numbers. Fewer bodies, more negotiations. The hospitals still filled, but not with the same inevitability. You changed the shape of it, she said one evening as they stood overlooking the city lights. I reduced the margin for excess, Raffaele replied. That's all anyone ever really does. And the cost? He didn't answer immediately. He rarely did when the answer mattered. Power that doesn't terrify doesn't last forever, he said finally. But power that terrifies too much collapses under its own weight. She studied him. So what are you now? Temporary, he said, and intentional. The answer satisfied her more than she expected. They never called what bound them love not out loud. Love was a word that promised safety neither of them believed in anymore. What they shared was quieter, chosen, maintained daily with awareness rather than illusion. Aveline returned to work, though not in the same capacity. Her movements were known, but not advertised. Protection followed at a distance that respected her boundaries. She treated people who would never know her proximity to power, and people who suspected it and kept their distance. She did not save the city. She refused to abandon it. Raffaele remained where he had always been, inside the machinery, not above it. He no longer expanded. He managed decline with discipline. When violence was necessary, it was contained. When it was avoidable, it was avoided. Some called it weakness. Others called it evolution. They did not live together. They did not pretend normalcy was possible. Their meetings were deliberate, unromantic in the way real intimacy often is. Every time Aveline stayed, it was a decision renewed, not a habit. One night, as the city settled into its quieter patterns, she asked him the question she'd carried from the beginning. Do you regret letting me stay? Raffaele considered the skyline before answering. No, he said, but I understand what it cost me. And if you hadn't chosen this, she asked, then I would still rule, he replied, and eventually I would have lost everything else. Aveline nodded. That was enough. Outside, traffic moved, lights shifted, people made small choices unaware of how close they'd come to becoming collateral. The city did not become good, but it became less cruel. And in the real world, that was not redemption. It was balance. If this story kept you watching, like and subscribe. Then tell me in the comments, was Raffaele right, or did he lose too much?